Hey folks, Eshin Lacoste here at Wyse Transformation, where we talk about mental health, spiritual practice, and self-care. And one of the reasons I created this channel is to sort of connect with people who are practicing, living, creating, cultivating mental health, self-care, spiritual practice on some level or on some aspect. And if you haven't, please subscribe to this channel because that really helps the algorithm. And so I've had this guest on before, and I'm having her again. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is MawuLisa. I move through the world as a somatic body worker, a somatic healing practitioner. I love to focus on healing trauma and finding the pathways to move trauma out of the body. As we're moving trauma out, hopefully we're moving more pleasure in and more capacity to
Um,
be aligned with our purpose and what we are here to do in terms of our divine assignment. I spend my time as a song weaver. I love singing in community and bringing folks together to sing together. Love and enjoy being a mom to a wonderful, brilliant son and being a mother to now godchildren. I officially have godchildren now. That's kind of wild.
I
Uh,
I love that.
yeah. I also move through the world as a diviner, a Medindin Logun diviner, and a Risha priest. We talked about that a lot in the last time that I got to be in this space with you. That is still just so fulfilling and rich. And yeah, I love taking and offering the healing arts and the spiritual arts in service to change makers, justice warriors, other politicized healers. Those are the identities that I love to support with my work. Anyone
Mm,
who's out here trying to be a warrior for liberation, I'm down to put all of my healing energy and love to pour into those vessels so that we all get to collectively support this project of bringing heaven to earth and improving
mm,
conditions and transforming conditions from things that are more oppressive to more life affirming. So I'm
mm.
really I'm about about on that mission. And
Yay!
yeah.
I love that. Aw. So the way I always like to start is, Lisa, what are you curious about these days?
What am I curious about these days? These days I'm spending a lot of time in curiosity, like honing and refining grief ritual work.
Mm,
I just think that there is so much to grieve collectively. Creating those spaces for myself and others to unburden grief so that we actually have more aliveness and energy to pour into the things that matter. So I've really been curious about, especially most recently, transmuting the grief that is connected to betrayal and just being a student of betrayal and how that shapes us, where we get stuck and caught, how isolating the experience of betrayal can be. That gets in the way of being able to come together collectively to transmute and release the energy of betrayal. Yeah, and it's like I feel like I just stepped into this specific portal. So
mm.
there's a lot that's unfolding that I'm excited to feel more into the unfolding of. Yeah, so that's been exciting me. Even though we have some active snow storms happening, I'm looking
I know
forward to the
yesterday was a
promise of spring. Yesterday was a surprise. I'm like, again.
y- yeah, no, yeah, yesterday was definitely a surprise that I I heard rumblings that it was gonna snow, but then it was like, oh, it's really coming down. It's really
Yeah.
coming down. So I really like how you sort of talked about grief in the sense that it doesn't necessarily have to be about the person moving on to the next side of the veil, but it's also loss of the relationship or loss of a friendship or loss of either moving on or just the loss of an old part of yourself that no longer serves you, right? And so this idea that grief is multifaceted, that it's not just for when individuals on to the other side of the veil.
Yeah, absolutely. I have gotten the privilege to really be in community with folks that are doing grief ritual work inspired by Francis Weller, who's inspired by the grief ritual work of Malidoma and Sobonfu Somé, and sitting with the gates of grief that Francis Weller and others have synthesized from Malidoma and Sobonfu's teachings. And there are multiple locations of where grief lands in us, and whether that's the grief of the sorrows of the world or the grief of the places that we have not known love, and recognizing the grief that's related to shames and internalized oppression and false stories that we've swallowed and places that we haven't loved ourselves the way we've needed to love ourselves and the grief that comes with that. There's the gate of everything you love, you will lose, which feels like the most well felt into gate as you were talking about death and the loss of loved ones, but just recognizing that we live in impermanence and everything that we
Mm,
love will
mm,
eventually be no more, and the
mm,
grief that comes with that. And then what we expected and did not receive as another gate of grief. And that's the one that really captures my heart the most. And I feel where betrayal falls deeply into that gate of what we expected and did not receive. If we expected loyalty, if we expected to be held with care and compassion, and to have those expectations be betrayed by those who we expected to love us and hold us, and the grief that comes with that. And then the
mm,
fifth gate is the gate of ancestral grief, and
mm,
the things that live in us, in our DNA epigenetically, that are older than us, that are the griefs of our ancestors that we've inherited because we are of them, and those griefs don't dissipate. They, much like epigenetics, they also come through and flow through us from
mhm,
some ancestral memory of the things that our ancestors grieved. Inside of ancestral grief, not only is there things to grieve that our ancestors went through, but I think it's also important to name for those of us that come from lineages where our ancestors did harm. And there's a lot to grieve there as well. Um, some people have pulled that out and put that as its own gate of grief of the harms that we've caused. But I think there's something important about sitting with ancestral grief in the sense of harms that our ancestors may have
mm,
inflicted, and even that lives inside of us, the memory or the knowing of that,
mm,
and recognizing that we're capable of that as well.
yeah.
And anytime we cause harm, that's a rupture to the social fabric. And whether we are connected with ourselves or not to feel it, there's a part of our soul that knows that we caused harm. That, unless we're out here like a sociopath or a psychopath, we probably feel the impact of causing harm. And that's another substantial thing to grieve.
The thing I like about the way that you describe the different processes, or I think you said gates, is that there is a place to hold that, right? There is a place to have a conversation. There is a place where you could sort of process that change happening, right? I don't know if you and I have had this conversation where probably more so in Western culture, there isn't sort of ritual markers of into childhood, into adulthood, from adulthood into to sort of like marriage and into marriage, into sort of like being an elder of the community, right, isn't much of a ceremonial process of transition from one um dimension of living to the next dimension of living, or just the aging process, right? Because I'm definitely not the same person that I was when I was 15, but
Uh-huh.
internally I still feel like a 15-year-old, sometimes a 5-year-old. But the idea that there is community or a space where somebody could process that transition and heal from that transition, because sometimes I think like individuals get like energetically stuck. I've been energetically stuck, and either it's because you haven't given yourself the space to be able to learn the lessons that particular chapter had for you, as you're getting prepared to go to the next chapter in your life. And just the grieving process, at least for me, right, like, in whatever facet, right, it falls onto me to be able to really process it, to really come to a place where either either I'm gonna throw a tantrum and not accept it, or I'm gonna sort of work with it and see what lessons it has for me. Because even when ruptures happen, if someone isn't creating a space to process that, where you should just like, and again, not saying that everything needs to have closure or some sort of end to it, but that process or that ritual of transition, I think is really important.
Yeah. So, what's so potent about what you're saying, Eshin, is that inside of this culture, we are sorely lacking those rituals that mark those transitions. And a transition is like a mini death because you are
Yeah.
moving from one state of being to a new state of being. And with that transition comes a loss. You have lost something. There is something that you are stepping away from that no longer works for you, is right for you, that has been familiar,
Yeah.
and there's attachment to that. And so, in the process of transition, there is grief for what we
Mhm.
no longer are, for what we're stepping away from and out of, and
Yeah.
how that way
Yeah.
of being has held us and cared for us and protected us and nourished us in a particular way. And now we're on to something different. And there's loss. There's loss there that needs to be grieved. And I think also where we just flunk and fail culturally. We get an F for continuing to feel like these rites of passages are something that we're supposed to be processing by ourselves in isolation,
Yeah.
in solitude. That
Yeah.
I give
Yeah.
it an F. That's a failure.
Yeah.
That is an absolute failure, because I think this speaks to one of the gates of grief that gets articulated about what we expected and did not receive, and what we all arrive here expecting is a village. We are social animals. We are wired. We are hardwired for interdependence. We are hardwired for interdependence. I'm going to say it again. We are social animals. And so
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
expectation of social animals is to have a village, to have a community that we get to be social inside of. And what should come with that are the rituals that are held by community, where we're not moving through any of these rites of passages alone, that we're actually moving through them with witnesses, with support,
Yeah.
with love,
Yeah.
with holding, with witnessing. Like, that is
Yeah.
what our souls expect, because that is that is the inheritance of a being that comes here wired for interdependence, which is what we are.
Yeah.
We are wired for
Yeah.
interdependence, and those are the rights that should accompany an interdependent way of life, where we support and hold each other collectively and communally through these rites
Mhm.
of passage. And when we don't have that, Whether we know to expect it or not, when we don't
Hmm.
have it, a part of our soul suffers. We suffer. We suffer in that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, I think it's one of the reasons why I think loneliness is on the rise is because we like you said, like we have this false idea that we're supposed to be doing this by ourselves, and that we're alone, and and I think again, not saying even if you're in a group of people that you're not going to feel lonely, but I think there's something, like you said, innate for us to be in community. Like we're not supposed to be handling most of anything on our own, right?
And to your point, I just want to name something here in the loneliness that really like sparked my attention. You named how we can be inside of a collective of people and still be alone. And I deeply suspect that a part of that has to do, in some part, if not fully, but in some part, about being with others when we are not allowing ourselves to fully be in our authenticity.
Oof.
When parts of us are hiding, are masking, and we are not able to be in our authenticity with others, then of course we fucking feel lonely because what
Yeah.
other people are experiencing is only a fraction of who we actually fucking are. So those other places,
Mm,
those other parts in us that are hidden away and are not seen and are like, wait, I'm a part of the matrix too. They're not being seen. They're not being acknowledged. They're not being witnessed. So of course you fucking feel lonely.
yeah.
Of
Yeah.
course.
Ugh. Oh my God. Yes. I think you said that beautifully. And I've never thought about it that way, in the sense of not fully being in, right? Like if you are, then there is no sense of lacking there.
Yeah.
And it's a wanting to also be seen, right? And so if you are already existing, you are being seen for existing. I love
and
that.
and beyond existing, being fully in our authenticity, because we can
Yeah.
exist and still hide, but it's really
Yeah.
about being fully in our authenticity.
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah. You heard it here, folks. You heard it here.
I had great teachers.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. Yeah. So I when we were sort of getting together, I had brought a lot of ideas, and it sounds like we're probably going to get to all of them. Probably not in this particular session, but the topic we're going to sort of focus today is, what does ancestral self care look like for someone who may have a complicated or painful relationship with biological family? And so that's alone is a very sort of heavy heavy topic, and there's so many different places that we could go to it. But I guess I want to start off with, what is spiritual self-care? How does that land with you when I say spiritual self-care?
Yeah. The first thing that arises for me is that part of spiritual self care is acknowledging that just like we have a physical body and an emotional body and a mental body, we also have a spiritual body. We are actually fundamentally spiritual beings having a human experience. But our souls are eternal. Our souls are eternal. So, these bodies are finite, but our soul is eternal. And part of spiritual self care is paying attention to and nourishing those needs at a soul level. Paying attention to and nourishing our spiritual bodies, whether that looks like giving ourselves space every day for quiet contemplation and reflection, giving ourselves space daily to be in meditation, where we get to truly be with ourselves and feed our spirit in that way, to give ourselves space to be in whatever spiritual practices feel good and feed us, whether that is reading spiritual texts that offer us guidance and inspiration, or being in prayer and direct communion with otherworldly fifth dimensional energies through, in my practice, attending Orisha, or through the practice of prayer, through um I think ancestor veneration is another way that we get to practice spiritual self-care. Sometimes my spiritual self-care looks like getting quiet and still and just observing nature, so that I get to, first of all, be in the awe and beauty of the gifts of creator that are all around me, that I get to be a part of and witness and experience this lifetime. Little birds playing in snow. I'm like, these birds, they're rugged, they're out here playing in the snow. These squirrels are running around in the snow. Oh my gosh. Like, look at creation. Look at the magic that's all around us. Like, I think part of spiritual self care is um, understanding our interconnectedness with all of creation, and understanding what our unique role is in the tapestry of creation, of being in right relationship with our stewardship of this planet and our resources. I think those are all things that feed the spirit, because they bring us back to the truth of the unity of all life, and that we are connected with all of life. So that's what's on the cream on top, so to speak, of how I would talk about spiritual self-care.
um, so you said ancestor veneration, and I guess how would you just distinguish, or is there a difference between ancestor veneration compared to ancestor worship? Is there a specific language that should be used, or is it sort of the same thing?
I think that you can use those words interchangeably. Um, I feel personally in my practice more comfortable with ancestor veneration, because there's something, um, I feel like I worship, um, divinity, but I venerate my ancestors. There's some slight distinction in there for me, but I think those words are often used interchangeably to talk about people's ancestral practices, which at the root are just about giving love and praise and honoring to our ancestors, feeding them energetically with our love, with offerings, with sacrifice at times. For those of us inside of traditions that offer ebo or blood sacrifice to our ancestors, anything that is offering them energy that supports their ascension to higher and higher and higher planes of existence, is what I would include in the practice of veneration. And everything is energy. So just pouring love into your ancestors by speaking their names daily and thanking them for everything that they've poured into you, whether you know it or not, or it's visible and seen or not, or it's named or unnamed. We are because of them. Literally, their DNA is flowing through me. The gifts that I embody if I look further enough back on the family tree, I'm probably going to run into an ancestor that already carried that medicine that I'm just like picking up where they left off, that I have been poured into by my ancestors. So the medicine bundle that I walk with, the gifts and the talents that I have, I feel like I have to offer them gratitude for my life. I wouldn't be here without them. And yeah, I'm moved in this moment to share a piece of poetry from
Yes, please.
it's an unnamed artist. I don't really know where this piece comes from. I'm so grateful that it found its way to me. I've been sharing
Yeah.
it profusely, but it's called Ancestral Mathematics. And I'm going to slip on my readers for this. Ancestral Mathematics. In order to be born, you needed two parents, four grandparents, eight great grandparents, 16 second great grandparents, 32 third great grandparents, 64 fourth great grandparents, 128 fifth great grandparents, 256 sixth great grandparents, 512 seventh great grandparents, 1,024 eighth great grandparents, 2,048 ninth great grandparents. For you to be born today from 12 previous generations, you needed a total of 4,094 ancestors over the last 400 years. Think for a moment how many struggles, how many battles, how many difficulties, how much sadness, how much happiness, how many love stories, how many expressions of hope for the future did your ancestors have to undergo for you to exist in this present moment? Ancestral
Whew.
mathematics.
Wow. MawuLisa, that was fire. Wow.
Gratitude to whoever wrote that. Thank you. Thank you. I really wish I knew your
Yeah.
name so I could speak it. But we've got a legion at our backs. A legion
Yeah.
at our backs. And my goodness, that's a lot to be reverent and thankful and in a spirit of gratitude for
Yeah.
all of that energy at our backs
Yeah.
that has poured into us, that allows us to be here in this moment.
I really love that imagery in the sense of in order to sort of like heal or to find some sort of balance or to sort of move forward, you got to look backwards. You sort of have to look backwards in the sense of like who came before you and that energy, you are the momentum of that energy that's moving forward. And in order to sort of heal, you have to look backwards a little bit. That was really good. That was really,
Yeah.
really good.
We can't be ahistorical out here. Like it's dangerous to be ahistorical, and you're absolutely right. We have to look back in order to heal because it's important to understand by looking back how we got to where we are right now. If we don't understand how we got to where we are, it's really hard um, to pitch forward. And I think we need to look back, but we need to live forward.
Yeah. Yeah. But it also has like this, like there's a foundation, right? Like, going back to this aspect of the loneliness, and I think you said it very beautifully. It's like it's not until you sort of live fully that loneliness sort of dissipates. And I feel like remembering your ancestors, right? Like, yeah, you should be embodying that.
Yeah.
You should be sort of stepping into that because that energy, those ancestors, they brought you here, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And and by living authentically, I think that's the word you use. By living authentically, you are honoring your ancestors.
That's right. That's right. There are two ancestors that I feel so tangibly and deeply, and that is my mother and her father. My mother and her father, Papa JC. And, from the stories that I've heard about my papa, he was a little bit of a thug. He was he was savage, you know? And my mother was just absolutely a stunning, sensitive, sweet, nourishing, community loving being. So oftentimes I pull from them and I say I'm as sweet as my mother and as savage as my grandfather. And like, to be able to pull from those two very different wells of being, like, it just enhances me. It's like it gives me the strength and the fortification to know that there is an immense well and capacity for sweetness that lives inside of me, but there's also an immense capacity for savagery when I need to tap into my inner warrior for protection, for fortification. Like, all of that is available, and all of those get to be a part of my ancestral inheritance. That's a part of my
Mm.
inheritance, that I get to be
Mm.
as savage as my grandfather and as sweet as my mother. And all of that is there. As spiritual as my great great grandfather, who was also a pastor, minister, deacon. I have plenty of spiritual warriors in my ancestral lineage. I have plenty of community organizers in my ancestral lineage. I have plenty deep-hearted, generous, resilient culinary geniuses at my back, and all of that's my inheritance. I'm like, yep, I'm a good cook, probably because of somebody at my back who was a good ass cook. I'm a deep lover and carry the medicine of being able to offer heart healing. And I'm sure that's because of some ancestral inheritance at my back. Like,
Mhm.
in the truest sense of I am because we are, that we includes my ancestors.
Yeah. 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 And do do you use blood memory or soul memory? And basically, it's sort of asking like, does healing does it necessarily have to be like a biological aspect, or can it be like a spiritual, adopting sort of like a spiritual practice when we're sort of talking about like how do we sort of bridge that gap between sort of ancestor and sort of where we are? Is it a matter of like this is sort of like in our blood because it's sort of generation, or is it sort of like it's a soul memory, a memory of the the only way I could sort of think about it is sort of like it's like this huge matrix, right? Like where we sort of like have access to, or sort of like this huge subconscious where we all sort of like upload or download, things. Is there a particular frame of mind that you think about how we sort of tap into um that that knowing, how we sort of tap into sort of like that ancestral library of information?
Love this question. It's juicy. I don't know if I have a definitive answer, but I really feel the potency and power in both. I feel the potency and power in a recognition of the inheritance that I have through my bloodline, which it's wide. It includes identities that come from West Africa. It includes identities that come from Europe. It includes identities that come from indigenous First Nations, but all of that is a part of my blood inheritance. And so I pull from all of that. And then also, I know that there are teachers that came into my life that are no longer here, that are ancestors, that because I encountered their work or their teachings have left an indelible mark on my soul. And I get to also draw power from memory, soul memory of those lineages that aren't a part of my bloodline, but are people that have come before me, that have were here before I was here, and that have poured into the cultural well. Um,
Mm.
the I'm looking at in front of me my Ayurvedic teacher, Shunyaji Pratichi Mathur, and the picture that I see of her, she has her father and grandfather, um, like almost pictured like as a lineage behind her in this picture. And, these are folks that are from India. And I have deep reverence and appreciation for those lineages because I've learned so many things through Ayurveda around health and healing and wellness and care for the body temple and disease and illness prevention, have poured into me greatly, and that I've been able to pour into others because that lineage, I've had the opportunity to be able to interact with that lineage. And so, I think it's all of the above. I think we get to benefit from and be healed by the medicine that flows through us from our blood lineage, and the medicine that flows through us from those collective souls that have poured into whatever you wanna call that. So, definitely both.
Have you ever worked with anyone who, seems sort of blocked in being able to be open to hearing from ancestor or other sort of spiritual guides? And if you have, what are some of the things that you sort of do to your comfort level to help them sort of get energetically unstuck?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, um, I find myself often working with, um, folks who are here through, a mixed heritage, that are, that may have both, Black and white ancestry, and that feel really harmed by white members in their family and that sort of white European ancestral line because of the inheritances of colonization and slavery and white supremacy. And they're just like, really, because of that, because of the harm that they're having to reckon with inside of their ancestral lineage, of really being able to, at the end of the day, fully accept themselves, because all of those lineages pour into them. And what's real is, you know, any part of ourselves that we deny or disown, that's a wound. That's a
Hmm.
wound. Any parts of us that we deny or disown is a wound. There's often moments in sessions or healing work that I'm doing with folks who are grappling with coming from mixed lineages where there have been harm, is to reckon with that. And these are folks that I often invite into an ancestral veneration practice, because what's also true is that white supremacy and these systems of oppression, these are man-made things. These are man-made things. These are man-made constructs. Um, when a child is born, preconditioning by their parents, we come in here just pure and full of love. And it is our social conditioning that patterns in um, oppressive um, tendencies. So, yeah, in the spirit of that, so much of the work is reckoning with connecting back to ancestors that have ascended and that are benevolent. And from that place, those white ancestors aren't stuck in the human made constructs of white supremacy and an inferiority of black and brown peoples. Like they understand the unity of all life and the sacredness that we all are. And when we're able to reach back far enough for those ancestors who have ascended, who are benevolent and who are of the light and have our best interest at heart, that have actually a loving hand placed on our hearts, there's a lot of healing in that. There's a
Mhm.
lot of potential for healing in that. Yeah. And it's ultimately about finding and reconnecting to the strength that's inherent inside of our wholeness,
Yeah.
inside of our
Wh-
wholeness.
wh- what's the conversation like when you're working with somebody or a group of individuals who say that they have family trauma, right? There's significant abuse, and not necessarily feeling like the path of healing is through that.
Through what's the
I'm
that?
curious, as we were sort of talking about, like looking backwards, and in order to sort of continue forward, you sort of have to look backwards in order to sort of claim your ancestors, sort of claim your heritage. For folks who struggle with that looking back, or acknowledging that to a certain degree, like in I'm gonna let you answer the question, but I guess my question is, how do you sort of sit with somebody who shares that they have family trauma, and that work is a heavy emotional lift for them to sort of even consider that there is any good in their family.
I think for that, what what's important to do is to really meet someone where they're at. And in meeting them where they're at, beyond the story at their back of how they got to wherever they are, there's actually turning in and facing the impact that literally lives in their muscles and tissues. So, because of whatever traumas happened with family and at their backs, there's probably skills that have been embodied because of that trauma and skills that are missing because of that trauma. And so what we get to focus on are those skills. Like, what do we
Mm,
need to build back into this system so that this
uh,
system is able to both access their longing, their sense of purpose, and live into that?
mm,
What skills are missing? What skills need to be embodied in order for someone to have the life that they long for, or for someone to connect to the things that they care about? So we go from there. We go from there. We always want to meet someone wherever they are. If it's not for someone to go spelunking in their ancestral garden and do that healing, we don't have to go there. We don't have to go there. We can never go anywhere that we're not ready to go.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
you meet folks where they're at. And
yeah.
we keep being inside of the question of, you right here, right now, what do you long for? What matters to you? Great. How do we get you there? What do
Hmm.
we have to heal? What do we have to fortify? What false beliefs do we need to reprogram? What new actions does your body need to learn to take in order to get you the life that you long for? What
Mm,
practices do you need to be in that are going to pattern into you with repetition the skills that are required for you to walk down a different street?
mm,
I mean, I'm
mm.
thinking about that piece of poetry that's used in recovery about walking down the street and you fall in the hole, and you walk down the street and you fall in the hole, and then you walk down the street and you see the hole and you step around it, and then eventually, hopefully, you just take another street. It's like, how do we support folks in finding their way to new pathways that allow them to walk towards their path and purpose in more powerful ways?
Yeah, I really love that concept because it sort of resonates with me because it's sort of it's very sort of trauma informed in the sense of really meeting a person where they're at and really sort of letting them lead their own healing.
Absolutely.
I'm curious again to your comfort level, and I don't want you to give out too many of your secrets because I want people to find you and work with you. Like the somatic piece, like I feel like I hear that a lot in your language, like in the sense of the somatic aspect is sort of like I'm assuming part of the foundation. What is the practice that you ask folks to do or the practice that you do when it comes to sort of incorporating the somatic aspect into sort of like energy work, ancestor worship or veneration?
Hmm. Well, I think I want to start with just being explicit about what I mean by somatics. And somatics is really holding the mind, body, and spirit in its wholeness. And that we are made up of a physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual body. And all of those domains are required in order to integrate the wholeness of our experience. So when I'm bringing somatics into an ancestral veneration practice, I'm listening for how all of those bodies get woven in to that practice of ancestral veneration. How do you get to be in practice with your physical body, your emotional body, your mental body, and your spiritual body inside of that practice? So I don't know if that answers your question or if you're digging for more.
Yeah. No, no. It's one of those things where, I really comes home to me in the sense of like, the when we're talking just this conversation, right? Or i- it's a whole body experience, right? It's not just cerebral. It's not just sort of, talking, right? There's movement involved, right? And depending on the circumstances, situation, and setting, right? Like there's drumming involved, there's breathing involved, there's something that you're literally putting your whole being into, and and I sort of find that very very fascinating in the sense of like when we're thinking about, and maybe this is a very limited way of thinking, but when we're at least when I'm thinking about sort of Western tradition of spirituality, it's very sanitary, right? It's sort of like you're not moving and you sort of stand, and maybe you're singing and maybe you sort of stand up and you sort of sit down, and that's basically it. But it feels like when I hear you speak, right, it's not just a thing, it's a doing, right? And
Mhm.
and and and, and in order to do, you sort of have to bring your whole being into it.
Yes.
Which I think is beautiful, and maybe I didn't ask the question correctly, but that concept of when we're talking about setting ritual, when we're talking about sort of a spiritual practice, it's not just sitting, right? It's a whole body experience that's happening while you're venerating your ancestors, while you're worshiping the divine energy, right? It's somatic.
That's right.
Does
Absolutely.
does does that
It completely makes sense. Inside of my personal veneration practice, before I even open my mouth to say anything to my ancestors, there's a whole embodied preparation that that needs to happen. The first thing I do is I make sure that this body that I'm bringing to my ancestral veneration has been cared for. I have a clean mouth. I brush my teeth. I I hydrate myself. I wash my face. I wash my hands. I like prepare this vessel
Yeah.
in a way that brings me, I'm coming clean, so to speak, to my ancestors.
Huh?
Part of this practice requires tending to the altar in a very physical way. So I am changing the waters. I'm taking the waters from yesterday and I'm offering them to a tree or to the earth with intention, and I'm filling up that vessel with fresh water and I'm offering prayers into that water. I'm thanking the water. I'm offering my love and gratitude to the water and speaking those prayers. I'm touching the water. I'm feeling the water. Then I'm placing that water on the altar. I'm interacting with all of the elements. I'm interacting with fire when I light the candle for my ancestors. I'm interacting with water when I bring them that water and I flick water down for them or I pour libation into a plant for them. I'm interacting with air when I burn sage or smoke or palo santo or incense for them. I am involving rhythm or sound frequency when I am tapping while I'm offering my prayers or ringing a bell when I'm offering my prayers, so that the frequency, the energy of the rhythm and the sound gets to amplify my prayers in a way. So it's a full body experience. It's a full body experience. I'm pulling on memory to call out all of those ancestor names that I know that goes back to my greats and my great greats and my great great greats on my father's side and my mother's side and my mother's mother's side and my mother's father's side and my mother's father's side and my mother's father's mothers and fathers. It's like that's a whole mental practice to pull on those names and to be with them. I have their pictures, so I'm there taking in their image. I'm using my imagination to I'm also, at times I'll do my research to try to find genealogically, you know, what information can I dig up about them? And then I sit and I receive. And I allow myself to be present with my body and with my breath and with my listening for any messages that want to come through or any emotions that want to be released in their lap. So it's a full body, it's a full body somatic experience being in that practice of veneration.
Which I love. The full, yeah, it's a full body experience that really sort of like solidify the connection.
I cook for them. And I you know, and I share food with it's a full body. It's a full
Um,
yeah.
to your comfort level, like how do you invite folks to sort of set their altar when it comes to sort of the veneration practice?
Mhm.
Um, and
Yeah.
not saying that there is a script, but what is sort of like the format of what one's altar could look like?
Yeah. You know, there is a I think the basics are a white cloth and a candle and a glass of water. That's the
Yeah,
basics, you know?
yeah.
set a place for them. You bring in the element of fire, which inside of the Dagara cosmology, fire is the gateway to the ancestors. And you offer them a glass of water so that their spirits get to inhabit or land or rest inside of that water. And that's the basics. And anything
Yeah.
else is just love on top. And you bring your sincerity and you bring your intention and you bring your respect and your loving presence. And with that, you can't really, you can't go wrong.
Yeah.
I do think it's very important. There's one thing to offer gratitude to all of your ancestors, to those 4,094 and counting ancestors at your back, to offer them gratitude. And then, there's a moment where we may want to call forward ancestors to help and support us. And I think it's important in that moment to call forth only the ones who are ascended, benevolent, and of the light. Because not all deceased energies have a high enough vibration to actually assist you. There are
Mm,
some low vibrational energies that are hanging out in that ancestral pool that you might want to be like, you know what? All love and respect, but I'm not going to actually call you on duty when I'm asking for guidance and protection and support. I'm going to call in the ones who are ascended, benevolent, and of the light for that.
mm,
So
mm,
I
mm.
think those are, some of the nuts and bolts, some of the basics.
Yeah.
If you hit those markers, you are doing well. You are doing well.
Nice. Nice.
And then follow
So
your
as
intuition.
yeah.
Beyond that, follow your intuition.
And as we're getting ready to wind down, is there any particular workshops or projects that you're working on, or what's coming up on the docket for you, MawuLisa?
Um, yeah, kind of business as usual.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Business as
Yeah.
usual. I'm looking forward
Okay.
to the ongoing grief ritual work that I get to support. I'm looking forward to potentially building community with a wider network of grief tenders, which I think is just so important because as tenders, we can't do this work in isolation and without support. So I'm
Yeah.
really looking forward to projects that are going to lead me in that direction. I'm always excited for going further down my own spiritual development rabbit hole. I am loving continuing to explore integrating craniosacral body work into my somatic bodywork practice. Yeah, I'm continuing the adventure of deepening in community in these new lands, Pocumtuck and Nipmuc lands that I'm living inside of. And yeah, and staying present for all of the holy assignments and divine appointments.
I love that. And I'm going to have all your information down below. So if folks want to get a hold of you or reach out and that they really resonated with what you were sharing. And so I'll have all your information down there. As always, MawuLisa, it's so good to have you on. I could like talk to you for
Yeah, I
forever.
was kind of shocked to
Um,
look up and see that our time was already I'm like, "Oh, we just did that."
we
It's
did. We did. And but again, right? Like I'm hoping to have you back, and so because I do have other topics.
I love your topics, Eshin. They're so inspiring
Yeah,
and
and
so
and please,
delicious.
if you ever like have any particular topic and like you want to chit chat, I'm more than happy to get that together for us to do that.
Oh, thank you.
As always, if you haven't, hit thumbs up. And do you have any finishing words you want to share with folks before we head out, Lisa?
Mm. Um, No, find a song circle.
Yeah.
Yeah, go find a song circle and, uh, gather with folks and be in the practice of singing together, and feel into those songs that feel like they're the right songs to carry us through these current conditions that we're living into, in this
Yeah.
moment, politically and otherwise, and songs that will fortify, your spirit. And yeah, sing because it's a delicious way to co-regulate.
Nice.
Yeah.
And with that, folks, I'll see you next time.
Bye.
Aw.